Hello, my creative friends. It's time to take another art break, and it's spring here. And what says spring more than some baby farm animals? I'm going to be doing a series of baby farm animals. I'm going to start with this sweet little calf, and then I'm going to do a set of piglets, and then end with a baby foal. It's going to be so cute to do that little horse as well. Today, I'm going to be breaking down the shapes of how you can simply draw this sweet little character. I'm going to show you how you can do some simple shapes to create the face and the body. And then I'm going to walk you through the watercolor steps to show you how you can bring it to life using mostly watercolor and just a tiny bit of ink pen to add the details. For those of you who'd like to have some help drawing, or maybe drawing's not your thing, I do have a sketchbook membership. That's where I have all of the line drawings for any of the paintings I do on my channel, and these make for a great trace and then paint option. Take out the stressful part of drawing if that's not what you want to do, and enjoy the painting part. I so appreciate all of those who have joined my membership. It really does support my channel, and thank you so much for doing so. Well, let's get started. I can't wait to show you how you can draw and paint this sweet little calf. Let's start with the head. I'm going to draw a line at a diagonal and then draw an egg shape with the largest area being at the top, and then coming down towards the chin will be the narrowest area. Now to create the nose in the front, I'm going to be starting on the outside of that very top part and then curving it in towards that center line. That's going to create that center nose part. And then for the very bottom of the nose, I'm creating kind of a marshmallow shape where it's a little bit of a squishy square that's down there. That's where the nose or the breathe holes will be for the cow. Will be there. For the eyes, I'm just doing simple ones that are almond shapes on each side. The one on that right hand side, it was shifted slightly over, so the bulge of the eye is coming out past the head shape. That's just a tiny little detail if you'd like to add it on there. The little part of that squishy little marshmallow needs a little bit of a U shape underneath that for the bottom of its mouth. This little guy does have some grass in his mouth, so you can add that if you would like. Now for the ears, they're going to be a little bit bigger. I like to draw those a little bigger for the babies just to give it that really cute look. They are just simply kind of going up, and then arching down, little football shapes. I gave it a flower crown on its head. Now to do that back, we're going to come out towards the back and then curve around. It's going to be a little bit shorter of a body because it is a baby, so you're going to keep that in mind. It's got that nice little rounded tummy there. And this leg on the back that I'm working on, that leg is in front. So we're going to see it come up to the belly and then stop. And then the one in the front, that's going to have two different legs too, a front one and a back one. So for the front one, I'm coming down right a little bit farther back, not right on the very chest part, coming a little ways down, and then making the little hooves at the bottom. That will be the back leg. And then the front one, you're going to start with your leg a little bit higher up into the body and then come down again. You're going to have just a little space in between those legs. And when we paint them, we'll add some shadows. But this way, you've got a front leg and a back leg. Now I'm adding that very back leg, and it's tucked behind. So I'm only going to see just a tiny bit of the top, and then it's going to start working into the bottom of the leg. You might want to give it a little kink, a little kind of a crook. A twist there, so it looks like it has a little elbow, or I don't know what they call them, the elbows or the knees, I'm not for sure. And then I put the little tail on the back. And that's your sweet little calf. Those are broken down into simple shapes. So let's go ahead and we're going to start the drawing part. And I'm going to be working on the Bockingford paper today and using my 2 watercolor sets to add the colors. Bockingford paper is a little bit different than the Canson brand that I normally use. It does blend colors slightly different and holds water differently, but it's still considered a student grade watercolor paper. I'm going to be mixing my layers to about coffee consistency, the first ones, and I'm going to go ahead and start on the cow. I decided to make a brown and white cow. Now you can do your cow any color. If you want to get really fancy and do it blue and white, you could try a blue and white one. I always encourage my sketchbook members, because you're tracing and painting, is to go ahead and do 2 tracings at the same time. That way you can experiment with different colors, practice more of your watercolor blends. Since you already have the drawing done, you might as well do it twice and play and work with your colors to see how they work. This time I'm using the Bockingford paper, and you can see how the blends are slightly different. They will react a little bit more like you're working on 100% cotton paper. If you use an Arches watercolor paper. That works completely different than the student grade ones because the student grade ones have more of a cellulose in it. Your water's going to sit different on it. It's going to absorb different. You're going to have different blending lines as well. The 100% cotton paper stays wet longer. Your watercolor blends will be a lot softer. So with watercolor, the paper does make the difference. I always say just spend a little bit more money on your watercolor paper and buy the watercolors you can afford. Watercolor paint comes in a variety of cost, so the upper end or the higher quality of pigments, those paints are going to be more of your student grade. I don't really suggest using Crayola crayon watercolor paints. They just don't work as well. But those inexpensive sets that you can get through Amazon, those will work well too. For this one, I'm using a Paul Rubens watercolor and a little bit of like an Amazon set. But I'm just blending my colors there. I'm keeping in mind of where I'm going to want some shadows. So I know that those back legs will be darker than my front legs, so I will have some shadows there. Underneath my little cowl, my cow's like jawline, and underneath that chin part of my cow will be darker there too. I'll need to add a little bit more dimension around the spots, or a little darker color, so then my spots will pop a little bit whiter because I'm going to be adding some color inside of those spots as well. This is just basically working on one area at a time and then letting my color dry and then adding the next colors to it. So I'm going to start with the cow and then I'm going to let it all dry, see how my colors dry, because I'll probably be adding another layer, most likely mixed to about coffee consistency, using my same color and adding another layer on. With watercolors, you're painting the shadows. So take your time, build your layers, and go a little slower than what you would with acrylic paint. After layering my first colors on the calf, I'm going to be moving up and doing the sunshine. I want to work on an area that doesn't touch my calf because watercolor always wants to flow where the paper is wet. So you want to work on an area that's not going to touch the calf so your colors won't run together. So I'm going to be working on that sunshine, but I am going to go down and pop in just a little bit of peach color, and I'm okay if a little bit of that brown might blend into that color on the edges. That'll just add a nice little contour if it does. So I'm using just a nice little peachy kind of soft pink on his nose. I'm going to be painting a red barn, but I'm going to be starting out with more of that kind of color, of that rusty brown color that I used on my calf. I'm going to be base coating that first as a base color for the red of my barn because I want it kind of more of a rusty looking red in the end. So I'm going to be adding the shades of brown first and then painting my red on top. Since my calf had had a little bit more time to dry, I went ahead and mixed up a very light consistency of that same shade of brown that I had used in the darker area. It's mixed to about tea consistency. I was going to be lightly brushing some of that color on the white spots and on his tail and a little bit on his ears too. I want the spots to look like they're white, but I don't want it to be so stark of the white of the paper. So I'm just blending in just a very subtle shade of that rust color. Watercolor always dries lighter, so what you're seeing when it's wet will dry slightly lighter. For the trees in the background, I was going to be using more of a light shade of green mixed to about the consistency of coffee, tap in my green, and then I took a little bit darker of that blue that's sitting in my set, just dry there, whatever I had, and then I tapped a little bit of that at the base of the paint of the trees. Because that paint is wet, that color is going to kind of be pulled up towards the green. I'm going to let it just blend naturally. For this little guy's hooves and for the nostrils and the eyes, I'm using a black that's in my set. It's mixed to a little bit heavier consistency for his feet, probably about cream consistency, a little darker. I'm going to be using the same color, but I'm adding more water, so it's about coffee consistency, and I'm going to be adding that to the eyes and to the nostrils. Animal eyes are very colorful. You really don't see white in them as so much, so you're going to have more color. So I'm going to be adding the black. Once that dries, I will add just a little tiny taps of the same shade of brown, mix very lightly around the outside, and then pop in a little bright highlight using my uni ball pen at the end. The brown on my barn has completely dried, so I'm picking up a red in my set that is more of an orange red. Now with reds, if you go too quick, too fast, they seem a little bit more matte and they just don't have the same life. So when you're adding the reds, go a little slower with that color as well. Having that brown underneath will help build my color a little bit more and have a little bit more rich quality to it. Reds usually always dry a lot lighter once they are on. This looks fairly dark, but it's still going to dry lighter, so I'm going to be adding some more additional layers on that red barn. The next area I'm going to start on is the foreground, and these flowers are in the foreground, and I'm going to make them a lot more colorful. These are fun flowers, not real flowers, so make them as bright and colorful as you would like. I'm going to do some oranges, some pinks, and add a little bit of purple. This is just a fun time to have some bright colors in the front, and since they're in the foreground, I'm going to be adding a little bit more detail to these flowers using my pen at the end. To begin the shading process on my barn, on the white areas, the roof, and the silo, I'm using the black in my set and watering it, adding a lot of water to it. So it's very light consistency of paint that's going on there for the beginning layer of my shadows. I'm brushing a little bit of that gray tone on and then picking up some of that blue turquoisey color in the top of my set, adding a lot of water to that as well. So I'm having a cooler shadow using the blue. I'm going to use that same color on my roof, and when I put that paint on, I'm going to be going horizontal to give it more of that roof feeling. I'm brushing that cooler shade of the blue on and then tapping in just a tiny bit of that gray to add another bit of shadow and letting the paint just mix on its own. The paint colors on my calf are completely dry, so I'm going to be tapping in just a few bits of color of pink and yellow and some tiny bits of orange on those flowers. I'm not trying to paint individual flower petals. I'm just tapping the colors on, and because they're wet, they're going to blend on their own and make some really pretty color blends that way. Now to work a little bit more on my sun and my sky area. I'm taking some of the orange and watering it down very much, and I'm blending that color out a little ways. There's a little bit of trick to think about when you're doing a sunshiny sky. When you're mixing the blue next to the orange, because they're complementary colors, that will look brown. So what I'm planning to do is to blend this orange out a little bit farther, and then I'll be adding shades of pink and a little bit of shades of red up there to make it kind of more of a sunsetty, colorful looking sky, and then that color will mix better with the orange glows of my sun versus just running blue right up to it and ending up with more of a brown color. So something to keep in mind when you're having a sun-filled sky. I've started to add the grass layers down below, and I like doing this country style, almost folk art style of landscape where my greens are different colors. So that back layer, I'm using a light shader green and then just getting darker as I come forward. Now I'm not going to want to blend this green too much, add a lot of water around those flowers because watercolor is not a permanent form of art medium. So if I get too much water in those areas, my colors are going to start to reactivate and blend out into those areas. So first I want to make sure all of my colors that I have painted are completely dry before I start adding my greens in, and then I just kind of move quickly and not add a lot of water to those areas. With this folk art style of background, I also like to come back in and take a little bit deeper bit of paint that doesn't have as much water and tap in little grass lines here and there too, just to kind of add a feeling of blades of grass. It's just a nice way to add some texture and it's not so smooth. And I'm going to be adding it just here and there underneath the fence line a little bit across, but not a solid line of it, just here and there. Now's the time too, I'm going to come back up and add a little bit more deeper shadows on the roof and on the whites of the barn. Still using those same colors of that blue on the very top, the grays mixed with a lot of water. It's basically the same colors. I'm just adding another layer on. For the very background, I'm going to be adding in some little scribbles of green, a little darker shade of green, and then I wanted to also add an idea of that there was paths that were leading from each of the doorway, that perhaps machinery had been pulled back and forth there, and there was maybe dirt paths there as well. So I'm adding in a little bit of the brown and some of the green, brushing it horizontally back and forth to create those little path ideas. Here you can see me adding just a tiny bit of taps of that brown watered down around the black of the eye. Now that it has dried, I don't have to worry about that black just kind of just bleeding out into the brown and just becoming a solid black. There's going to be just a subtle bit of difference. This is where I'm also going to be checking my other white areas to see if I need to be adding other shadows, perhaps around them to make them pop out more. And that's what I did around the tail, is I added another deeper shadow of brown around that tail area, and some of the spots that I thought needed to be brightened up, I added those next layers there too. Once those little grassy paths at the very background had time to dry, I went back in and added another layer of color. Now it's time to work a little bit more on the sky, and I'm going to be adding in the blue. But first I'm going to be adding plain water on. I want to make sure I have a light enough color so I don't end up with that brown mucky looking color at the very top. It either could be brown or it could end up looking very green. Either which way, that's not the look I'm going for. So I'm going to be putting the blue on. I'm keeping it a little lighter at the top and then adding a little bit more of that turquoise color at the base, because your skies are always lighter at the top and then they get darker as they come down. I'm going to be brushing those colors on, but then taking a little bit of clear water in between the blue and the yellow and the orange and adding a little bit of wet there. But then I'm going to be blending in a little bit more of the pinks and the reds and a tiny bit more orange to give it that sunsetty, rising sun, whatever it might be, glow to that area. Once my painting is completely dry, now I'm going to start the pen work, and I'm going to start out with my micron pen and the tip size 01. I'm starting with a small little nib because I want just the finest little bits of lines just here and there, not connecting everything, starting and stopping and having just a small little bit of work. I don't want in the final end to have more of like a solid, almost color book style where you see outlines on everything. I just want to keep that very light feeling to this painting, so I'm going to be using the outlining very sparingly, but in a way that's really going to make the difference in this painting. All those little tiny details will start to pop out, and you'll start to see some extra character develop on this little painting. That's how I added the black to my painting, but I'm also adding just tiny bits of white as well. On the eyes, I did add a catch light. If you add a catch light to your eye, you just want to make sure if you add it to the left side of one eye, you add it to the left side of the other. If you add it to the right side, add it to the right side of the other eye. That way your eyes will look balanced and they won't look wonky in the end. And now I'm just adding the tiniest bits of scribbles of white here and there, not getting overly done, but just adding a little bit of brightness to this painting. Well, it's almost done. Let's take a look at what it looks like in my studio, sitting amongst some of the other spring things I have done so far on my channel. This little spring baby animal picture looks so cute amongst the other items I've created so far this spring. We've had lots of bunnies and other whimsical characters. If you enjoy doing whimsical characters as much as I do, come on over to my channel and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It really does help YouTube push my videos out there. Well, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again. And perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.